Hey, something really cool happens during the Middle Ages in Europe. Also, incorrectly known as the Dark Ages, and we'll talk about why that's incorrect on the Dark Ages here in just a second. But after the fall of the Roman Empire in 476, a couple hundred years later, while everybody in Europe is fractured and trying to rebuild empires and kind of brushing up against each other and lots of internal fighting in Europe. This actually creates a very cool opportunity for outsiders. And one of these outsiders, because of some situations in the Arab countries, is an Islamic expansion into Spain. From about 711 over the next couple of years until about 716, uh, the Islamic world is going to launch sort of an expansion into Visigothic Spain. Remember, the Rome's fallen apart, and so the Visigoths are in charge of much of Spain until about 756, for about 40 years. Islamic Spain is under the control of the Caliph, the head person in charge of the Islamic Empire right now. The Caliph is back in Damascus. Spain has a local governor, but we see some massive changes happen in 756. And the book talks about a lot of the internal fighting within the Islamic Empire. But just to kind of summarize that for a teeny bit, up until about 750, the Caliph in charge of the Islamic Empire was ruled by, or the Caliph was a member of the Umayyad dynasty. In 750, though, we have a coup, and the Umayyads are overthrown by the Abbasid dynasty. Largely, this sort of dispute is over who is the rightful successor for Muhammad. There's a dispute over which person this should be, and that originally fractured into the Umayyads and the Abbasids. Once the Abbasid dynasty, though, takes control, uh, they attempt to kill as many Umayyads as possible. Um, you know, it's as rough as it sounds. They're attempting to be pragmatic, and we don't encourage sort of genocidal actions, but as they're trying to be pragmatic because they're trying to prevent another Umayyad return. You don't want to overthrow this other dynasty and then have them just come back. So they attempt to kill as many as possible, but a few of them survive and they flee to Spain. Spain at this time, under the Islamic dynasty, lower southern Spain, is called Al Andalus. And uh, the Umayyads down that are in Spain, the head of that group right now is Abd al-Rahman, and he becomes the new emir of Al Andalus, and he does a really interesting thing. He proclaims independence from the Abbasid dynasty that is still back in the Islamic world, in the Arab world. And so we've got two sort of Islamic empires. There's one in the Arab countries, and there's another second independent or Islamic empire in Spain. Uh, Under the Umayyads up in Spain, that Al Andalus large community is going to reach their peak around the year 900, and this is kind of the golden age for Islamic Spain. Um, and something kind of interesting is they are doing very well in Al Andalus in Spain, but the rest of Europe is very much struggling, and we'll talk some more about what's going on in Europe during the early Middle Ages in the next video. Um, Anyway, another thing, around 912, at their golden age, the leader at this time is Abd al-Rahman III, not related to the other guy, which is kind of confusing, but Abd al-Rahman III, though, the cool thing about him is that he didn't visibly fit in with other Arabic people in Al-Andalus. He had light hair, he had blue eyes, and a lot of that was because his mother was French. There was a lot of intermarriage and stuff. And he reportedly dyed his hair jet black in order to fit in a little bit better with the rest of his Arabic contemporaries. Probably, not even possibly, but probably because of really needing to sort of fit in with the rest of the Umayyad groups. He was extremely forceful in putting down challenges to his authority. A great example, a lot of rebellious activity came from another guy, bin Hafsun. And Hafsun led several rebellions, and he ultimately died in 917 during Abd al-Rahman III's rule. And in 917, after Hafsun died, his sons took over the fight, and about 11 years later, his sons are defeated. Rahman III, though, wanted to send an absolute clear message. And after Hafsun's sons were defeated and he was able to do these things unchecked, he had the corpse of Ibn Hafsun dug up 11 years after his death and publicly crucified. The idea here is that he was trying to send a message that even in death, al-Rahman would find his enemies and punish them. And so you really, don't want to present a challenge to this guy. Around the end of the 900s, Ramun's been gone for quite a while. Around the end of the 900s, Islamic Spain is going to fragment into about a dozen different Islamic kingdoms. And we'll see this in Europe too. The rest of Europe will fragment into little kingdoms and then kind of amass and then crumble again. And they go through some infighting. There's another build-up to try to amass control over all of these independent kingdoms, and it will crumble once again. And finally, in 1031, that's when all of those kingdoms finally crumble, and that will allow, after 1031, that will allow Christian Europe to sort of recapture Islamic Spain and push the Islamic kings and their people out of Islamic Spain, because as fractured kingdoms, they're not going to be able to sort of withstand a increasingly united Europe. I don't want to say a united Europe, but an increasingly united Europe. A big push comes from France out of the Merovingians, and we'll see that in a little while. Thanks.